Cultural Position of Government. Honored to be here.
Good morning. I'm Daniel Sayana, the CAO for the ACRD.
Okay, so now we'll go online and I'll just call you out in the order as I see you. Director Siga, please introduce yourself.
Veda Siga, Director for Area C.
Director Boyko.
Brett Boyko, Electoral Area Director for Beaufort. Thank you.
Director Roth.
Good morning, Susan Roth for Beaver Creek.
Director Beckett.
Morning, everybody. Bob Beckett representing Banfield Area A.
And Director Johnson.
Morning, Kirsten Johnson, Director for the Toquat Nation.
Thank you, everyone. We have an agenda from us. Is there any additions from directors? Saying none, is there any additions from the corporate office?
No addition.
Thank you. Seeing no additions, going to have a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Moved by Director Coote, seconded by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Any declarations or conflicts of interest? Seeing none, we'll go to the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on May 21st, 2025. Is any errors or omissions? Seeing none, could I get a motion to approve that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on May 21st, 2025 be adopted? Moved by Director Sparrow, seconded by Director Beckett. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. No petitions, delegations, or presentations, no correspondence, and request for decision. The Roth Train Trail lease update. Michael, please go ahead.
Good morning. I'm Michael McGregor, Lands and Resources Coordinator with the ACRD. And today I'm going to go over a log turn trail lease update and also request some direction from this committee on staff actions to proceed after. So I'll start from the beginning. And 1993, we've held a lease with the Ministry of Transportation for the ACRD managed section of the log turn trail. So that's from power lines out to Wolsey Road. There are other sections of the log turn trail on Mosaic, Crown, and city owned, but that is outside of the scope. So since 1993, we've been under the same management plan and same lease agreement with the ministry. And it's always been a non-motorized lease, but there has been and continues to be motorized use on the trail. So in 2023, we went through a process where we updated that management plan. Did about a year and a half of public engagement, a number of different times, and went to this committee and the board to receive direction on what that management plan will look like. In 2024, that was passed by the board of directors. And a big piece of that was that we wanted to incorporate motorized use underneath the lease and the management plan. So direction after it was passed was to engage with the province to update the lease to make motorized use an allowable use on the ACRD managed section of the log turn trail. And I admit that it has gone slower than anticipated, but we have had continuous dialogue with the province over the last a little bit over a year to achieve an updated management plan. And I would say just in the last month and a half, we received some correspondence from the province that kind of puts the ball back in our court to come back to them with some more information on how the ACRD is going to make some changes to the lease or how we operate the log turn trail. And I'll read that correspondence directly. So after they had done a review of the updated management plan and supplemental information, they did a legal and policy review, and then they requested additional information on the enforcement / management plan for motorized vehicle users, specifically to address issues of non-insured vehicles on the trail and on portions of the trail that require connection via public road dedication. So I think that kind of puts it to us where how are we going to enforce non-compliance for what the standards of use are, specifically for motorized users, and specifically non-insured users. So, typically the ACRD to have the power to provide enforcement would be through a regulation bylaw. So the ACRD does not currently have a regulation bylaw, parks regulation bylaw that applies to the Log Turn Trail. We do have two parks regulation bylaws for Sprout Lake and for Mount Arrowsmith Park. But the rest of our parks, don't have a current regulation bylaw. So we've kind of looked at this and come up with three different options within the report there. Option one would be the staff recommendation. When you compare it to other regional districts of our size and on Vancouver Island, it is standard to have a consolidated regulation bylaw that covers all ACRD parkland. And so the recommendation would be to direct staff to go work on consolidating one regulation bylaw. And other than the Log Turn Trail motorized use, the intention isn't to change any of the rules or regulations that we're currently observing in ACRD parks. So your average user wouldn't notice the difference, but it would formalize it, be publicly available and clear. And then we'd work with the Ministry of Transportation on a motorized use section for the Log Turn Trail to achieve their standards that they're looking to see, so that we can update that lease. Option number two would be to do one just for motorized use on the Log Turn Trail, a regulation bylaw, and not do a consolidated one. This was brought up at the Regional Parks Working Group earlier this month, and this was the option that they suggested or they supported via motion. And then again, it would be working with the Ministry of Transportation to ensure that that bylaw satisfies their requirements in order to update that lease. And then option number three would be that the ACRD board does not support developing a regulation bylaw. Communicate with the province that we're proposing a communication campaign, and it's aimed at informing users and the public on expected standards of use. And then we just wait to hear back from the ministry on whether that's acceptable. So I'm happy to answer questions. I know this is an interesting topic, so.
Thank you, Michael. Director Boyko, then Director Roth. Please go ahead, Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a very detailed engagement plan that we had. It spanned over 1.5 years, and we had a very large group of people actually provide the feedback, and we had about 80% support to motorize the trail from over 12% of the engaged people affected in the Beaufort and Cherry Creek areas. So I say it's a very good success of public engagement with what happened. And we have a very clear direction from the public that we want to motorize this trail. So I have about 5 questions here, and I don't want to take up all the time, but one of the important ones here is, you mentioned that we need connection via public road dedication. And when I go back to the management plan that was approved by the board, and it says, where the trail uses residential roads, Desmond to Horn Lake Road, ACRD should negotiate with adjacent landowners to reestablish a trail right away. Has this happened, or what is the status of that? And then I'll have about 3 follow-up questions. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you for the question. I think I'll answer it in kind of 2 parts. So the direction from the province about establishing, oh, sorry, I lost my spot here. So the direction from the province about that public road right-of-way connection, is specific to Horn Lake Road and Desmond Road. So the trail it splits at that point, and users are required to travel on the roadway to go from one section of the trail to another. And then, so there is a process through the Ministry of Transportation where a permitting system can be established with the RCMP to cover, permit that use, as long as the RCMP, is happy with the process that's developed. We haven't gone too far down the road other than initial conversations with the ministry and the RCMP. But the other side of the thing is that there is a public right of way on that kind of cuts 3 properties in half. And that's, within the lease area that was done in 1993. The trail has not been constructed on those properties or to cut those properties in half. And I know the management plan identified that as a potential solution or item to follow through on. That has not been followed through on. I think the only action items looked at today is, permitting that section. And even if it were followed through on, it wouldn't eliminate the need to travel along the roadway, because you still need to travel on Desmond Road. So I'd say, to summarize, there is a process in place that can cover motorized use, connecting the trail, but the idea of constructing new trail on those sections that cut properties in half or segment them, is not on an action or just being looked at.
So although we said to reestablish it through there, the preferred way is actually to send the quads on the road on 2 different roads. Is that what we're saying here?
You have to send them on the road no matter what. It's just if there were a connection, you could shorten that route a little bit, but not by much.
I'm just looking at a map. It looks like we could cut it right in half. Okay. Where does the idea of this enforcement come from? Like, can we actually see a copy of the letter from MOTI, or exactly the wording, or is this something that came up from the ACRD as a suggestion to keep this thing going? Because this is not based on the direction that we got back from the public. Thank you.
So the wording used on page 2 is the exact wording, and it was just from an email. There wasn't a formal letter. There was 2 bullet points in the bottom half of the page. That's the exact wording of the province.
So when it says we undertook a legal policy review, who is we? Is that the ACRD, or is that the ministry that undertook that policy review?
That's the ministry that undertook that.
Okay. So right now we don't do any enforcement or management plan, and we don't have any resources. Who would magically be able to do this? And if we're not, who has the time extra to do this? And if they're not going to do some enforcement, what are they going to be doing now? Thank you.
So I'd say that currently we don't dedicate resources to enforcing any rules or regulations. We don't have any regulations that apply to the long-term trail. So if we were to have a regulatory bylaw, the ACRD board would be able to dedicate the resources that they see fit, and that can be set as high or as low as the board sees suitable. So I'd say once the bylaw is presented and is agreeable to the board, then each budget discussion kind of sets that standard of how many resources are available for enforcement.
Is there an option to send this back to the province and say the ACRD is not interested in looking at this because it's taking too long and we don't want to have bylaws, and the people give us very specific direction that they want minimal levels of service, minimum level of work, and minimal efforts from staff to pay for this?
I'd say that aligns with option 3 that was provided, where we communicate to the province that we're not going to pursue a regulation at this time, and that we just want to go forward with a communication campaign. And, I'm not sure what the province's reply would be, but it's an option.
Like, then when you say communication campaign, that is a campaign to say this is the permitted uses, and we're not going to permit motorized use, even though more than half of the traffic actually is that right now and is actively managing the trail and looking after it after all the recent storms?
I would say the communication campaign would be, if an updated lease is going to be, agreeable to the ministry and to the ACRD board, any changes of that proposed updated lease, so to communicate those changes to the public, as well as, expected uses, etiquette and whatnot. So not along with the regulations.
Okay. Final question before I let everyone else. What has been the direction sent to the community, the working group? Have they been told to, the board has made a decision to motorize this? Are they working towards efforts on what the signage will be and what the etiquette will be? Or what actually is the direction given to this working group? Because the directors are not allowed to be with it. Thank you.
So yeah, the direction for the working group and the communication has been that this management plan was updated in last year in 2024. So this is the direction from the board to incorporate the updated management plan and update the lease as well. So that working group has been working towards providing feedback, such as the resolution in this report about what types of changes that they'd like to see. And in this option, they supported, option number 2, which is to follow through on a motorized only regulation bylaw. And then there's been good discussion at that group about this. So it has been focused around how can we enact these changes, not kind of renegotiating the plan.
Thank you very much. I'll let someone else go.
Thank you, Director Boyko. Director Roth and Director Siga. Please go ahead, Director Roth.
Thank you. So enforcement measures extend beyond the original scope of the mandate. In the spirit of transparency and accountability, I think this decision should be returned to the public who granted the original mandate. It goes far beyond. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Siga, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just threw the chair to Michael. Does the mosaic piece of the trail allow motorized vehicle traffic? And do you know what their management agreement with the province of BC is?
So formally, Mosaic does not allow motorized use on their section, although that there is motorized use occurring. Mosaic does have an agreement with the Hill Climbers Club of Alberni for motorized use on some of their trails, but that section of Logturn Trail is not included in that agreement. So there was some misunderstanding on that in previous communications.
Oh, okay. So we're sort of put in the position of making regulations around the trail use because we've acknowledged the motor vehicle traffic on it. I just, on the East Coast, like in Glace Bay, there's motorized trails. And there are places where where the motorized traffic has to cross the highway. And as long as it's done respectfully, I haven't noticed any RCMP intervention, but certainly when there are complaints and people do get carried away, the RCMP are at those junctions between the trail and the roads, and they're actually managing and ticketing riders. Thank you.
Yeah, just to build on a previous comment there. So the provincial system, if a motorized vehicle or an off-road vehicle crosses a roadway perpendicularly, there's no need for a permit under their system. But if it travels along the roadway, there is a permit system in place, and that traveling is connecting 2 points of a trail, like in this case, so that there is a process that we could follow through on that. The one piece that we cannot capture under our use is people going from their driveways to the trail. We don't have a process to capture that use.
Thank you. Before I go to Director Boyko, I would like to ask a question, if I may. One of the first things I learned when I was elected to City Council was don't enact a bylaw that you don't have the ability to enforce. So my concern is if we make rules and regulations for ATVs, how are we going to enforce them? For example, if we say no ATVs in the residential neighborhood after 9 p.m. And right now there's a real issue with ATVs going on the Logturn Trail, like at 2 in the morning. It really disrupts the residents' physical health and mental health because they're not getting enough sleep and they're interrupted almost every single night. So if we say no ATV use after 9 p.m., and I'm just using that as an example. So how is that going to be enforced? Who do they call and how do we get this person or persons who are doing this? Because you're not going to go out at 2 p.m. or 2 o'clock in the morning. And then by the time you get there, this person is long gone. So is there any plans on or any discussions on how we're actually going to enforce any kind of bylaws or regulations?
Well, I'd say that, the enforcement capabilities were spelled out within the regulation bylaw, which hasn't been created yet. But, we could, dive into those specifics as it gets created and, discuss, options for the best use. Like I said before, the motorized use on roadways connecting the trails, those would be under an RCMP permit. So I assume that we'll have further discussions with our RCMP to address concerns like that.
Director Boyko. Director Boyko, you muted.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with what you just said. Why would we make a bylaw where there's no way to enforce it? And there's no staff. And honestly, this thing's what, 22 kilometers long? And I'm looking at kilometer 13 out where I am. There's no way you're going to be able to enforce anything out here. It's a pipe dream. And we've already had representations from the RCMP in town here. They're stretched to the limit just keeping people alive and everything else going on in town itself. They don't have time to come out and do this. So realistically, how would we actually enforce this? We can say something, and there's rules like the hill climbers have a good relationship with Mosaic, that they need to have insurance and spark arresters and all these kind of little things, and then it can go forward. What is the actual plan? Because making up a rule that will not be followed and is not enforced is a waste of our time and money. And all of us talking here is, you know, $1,000 an hour just sitting here talking. So I wanted to like to hear a bit more about that. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, I agree. Having rules that we have no intention of enforcing seems like a waste of time. But if the goal is to adjust the lease so that we can allow motorized use under our permit, this is a requirement from the Ministry of Transportation. So if we intend to do that, then this is one of the steps that we're able to do.
So if it's a step that we're looking to do, I assume staff has looked into this. What would be the enforcement plan? Can we have a bit more details on that? Thank you.
So during the Regional Parks Working Group, we had some pretty in-depth discussion about options here. And the consensus of that group would be to try to get as low a service and for enforcement as we can, which would be to set it as complaint-based, set a budget for low, whether that's $500 or $100, and then once we expend that budget for the annual year, it renews the next year. So that's the consensus of the Regional Parks Working Group.
But then someone says, I saw a quad when this is the license plate going at this time. What happens then? Send a report to the RCMP and someone sends a letter? Like, I'm just trying to see how realistic this is and make sure it's not going to be, oh, I'm mad at my neighbor, so I'm going to report him 5 times kind of thing.
Director Sparrow.
Thank you. But I'll go point by Director Boyko up there. One of the things we did at the log, we were at the McLean's Mill, the log train trail meeting, was when we were talking about going and putting motorized vehicles, ATVs on there, one person stood up and said, if you do that, I'm putting my 4x4 on there and you can't stop. Digging into it. Problem. So how do we differentiate, if you're going to do this, between non-insured motorized vehicles or ATVs, not little itty bitty geo trackers? And how are we going to do that? How are we going to do insurance? So if we go, I mean, the liability insurance, so if we say we're going to put non-motorized vehicles on there, and then someone piles up because the roads are not working condition for the potholes, with the low maintenance, who is liable? How are we going to fix things?
So the first part of your question, I'd say that there's a clearly defined off-road, off-highway vehicle (OHV) and then a non-highway vehicle. So the on-highway vehicle with license plate, like a geo tracker, would be not considered an off-highway vehicle. But we are seeing pretty substantially sized side-by-sides and electric quads, electric bikes. There's blurring of lines between what an off-highway vehicle is these days, but that's why it's important to define it and keep up with it and have a current bylaw. ICBC has off-highway vehicle policies, and I think the intention would be to mirror like the Forest Service road policy, which is the off-highway vehicle policy, $200,000 fine. But again, that would be spelled out, during the development of the bylaw.
Thank you. So with this bylaw, besides ATVs, also have to talk about electric bikes and walkers, what their responsibilities are too, because the bylaw has to cover some policy, not. So they'll all be included.
Yeah, I'd say, option 1, the staff recommendation would be to develop a bylaw for all ACRD parkland, and that would, address motorized use, camping, fires, dogs, kind of put it all on paper. Option 2 would be to just focus on the motorized use of log turn trail. So really specific scope.
Thanks. Yeah, this is the first year I haven't seen an open fire out there in the last 4 years. I walked out there and there's campfires and we posted. There is kind of annoying that way. Also there is, when's the last time we actually did make so since then?
When the ACRD passed the updated park management plan, the direction from the board was that we are not maintaining the trail bed itself. We're maintaining the bridges, making sure the infrastructure is safe for use. I think the last time it was graded was probably 2022 or maybe 2023, but we have not done any grading the last few years. And we have a bridge inspection that's going to be available for review, hopefully in the next month. And there's going to be some bridge work or recommendations for bridge work.
Kev, I bring this up because there's we're talking about motorized vehicles in nighttime. There's an area they choose, which is Andrews Lane. Right? And they go up there and they shoot up. There was a lock block in place. They moved out of the way to access the trail. And now that by going up there, they've actually cut into the side of the trail to about halfway through. So we have damage on the trail right now. And it's been graded in 2023, 2 years ago. I'm walking the trail. I walk the trail probably 4 times a week. Anyway, the deterioration starting to happen. So we're going to have to do something. They're going to put ATV, so that there's going to be more deterioration with that too. So. Besides looking at the management plan, just for the legalities of the motorized vehicles, we also look at it for deterioration, what's happening because of the motorized vehicles, and where are the access points are going to be? Is that going to be part of the plan, or is that just going to go on with the one go? Because if we're going to say we're going to put them on, then we have to have a landing spot. We do not, so we'll start here. About the roads that we're doing now. Is that part of the plan too?
Within the management plan, access points was one of the items discussed. And there's been further discussion on that. I don't think that there is a desire to have an access like loading unloading area within the Cherry Creek residential neighborhood. But I know that the Ministry of Transportation, that's one of the items that they're keen on, addressing, so they don't see as much people traveling from further away or in their backyards to the trail. Like they want a unloading and loading spot. That spot hasn't been identified as something to pursue yet, but it's part of the conversations.
So that's part of the plan too, is the loading, unloading areas, the whole insurance thing. So it's going to be a nice, long, complicated time.
It will be a long, complicated plan. But like I said, there isn't a desire to have that loading and unloading spot within the residential area, and I think that's pretty consensus across the board. But addressing the ministry's concerns is one of the things that we want to do as we'll talk it through. Hopefully, find a solution.
I'm probably repeating Director Sparrow's question, but that is a concern for the residential area, on Horn Lake and Desmond Road. Is right now they're getting a lot of ATVs and off-road vehicles going up there. What would be the process to try and stop that? Because you talked earlier about RCMP having to give right of way or access. Can you just explain what this whole process would be? Because right now they're really disturbing the residents in that area.
So Horn Lake and Desmond Road, is the gap that connects one section of the trail to another. And so there is an RCMP permit, that system that we could set up where users would be obligated to go to the RCMP, get that permit, have it on their motorized vehicle when they use it. And then, it kind of plays into the enforcement. So non-compliance with that, how is that going to be enforced? Those are the questions that we want to answer through the development of this.
Thank you. Director Boyko, then Director Siga. Please go ahead, Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. So speaking of permits, when we did have the very good community engagement, nobody wanted permits. That was very clear from the public. So us bringing that and enforcing that, we're going to upset the public that is paying us to talk about this and owns this facility, because we all own it as members of the public. So I don't want to make up that we're going to make up some kind of permit or something like that, because definitely the public is not in favor of that. And that was very clear on the engagement. With regard to access, I'm just looking at the ACRD map here and I see Maybell Road, Mozart Road, good access, start a trail right there. You got parking spot there, your McLean's Mills, almost pretty well shut down. There's always lots of parking there, and there's lots of spots all along the trail for access. I don't think we're looking at adding in a lot of future points at this point. So we have to remember that we have a direction from the public to do this, and changing things now is going to be very controversial. If we're going to look at changing things and put in permits and bylaws, we got to go back to the public and say, hey, we've had something back from the ministry. They want to do this. Let's figure it out, because we are going to upset the public very much. It's already been waiting 18 months for this to happen. Thank you very much.
Can I just remind the directors to speak directly into your microphone because some people are having trouble hearing? Did you have a response, or do you want me to move forward to the next director?
I would just reiterate that, this is in response to the direction from the Ministry of Transportation trying to update this lease. So, it's not come from the staff thinking that, we want to be out there enforcing bylaws and regulations. We're just trying to achieve the objective of updating the lease and incorporating motorized use. These are so we're looking for direction from the board or this committee to see what the next steps would be to achieve that goal.
Thank you, Director Siga, then Director Roth. Please go ahead, Director Siga.
Thank you. Yeah, I think when we started this discussion, it was that the least expensive route to go was to have access to motorized vehicles, and they would maintain the trail, and that would be the least expense to the ACRD parks and recreation. So it wasn't drawing off resources from other areas and parks. This sounds like if we're going to be getting into bigger expenses, we have to relook at what that expense is going to entail. If we're going to have to start creating new bylaws, there's an expense to that. If we're looking at enforcement, there's an expense to that. So I think this might go back to determining finally what is required in terms of the legal and policy review. And we might just have to go back to the drawing board and look at the expenses. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment, Director Roth.
I would like to make a motion. I was just trying to work it out right now, but that enforcement measures extend beyond the original scope of the mandate. The decision to add enforcement measures be returned to the public who granted the original mandate. We need to go back to the people, so I'd like to take that route.
Director Boyko?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me good now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. So we do have a very clear mandate. This is, like I said, this is a story of engagement success with the ACRD and the public. We had 3 main events. We had lots of good conversations, and we had a very clear mandate to move forward and motorize the trail. If we're looking at changing that, we should go back to the people. Okay, we set up one event, rent something big, because there's going to be a lot of people there, because we had about, I'm going to say 1,200 people last time, all involved in all the multiple events and surveys and all the other engagement, and have a good conversation and figure out what we want to do moving forward. Because if we're going to change things, we need to get the public on board with what we're going to do, or else we're going to lose their faith and trust in what they've already sent us to do. So I will second this motion. Then we'll figure out a way to do things together. I see Jenny's got her hand up there, but we need to figure out a way to do this, because we need to keep the public engaged, and what we're doing is pushing us away from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Then Director Cruz.
I want to commend Michael for the report. I think it's really comprehensive and explains a lot of things. And I think that in there, we really chewed this through and discussed, there is a lot. involved in creating a bylaw, whether it's a full parks bylaw or a log train trail bylaw. And we are really trying to see what we can do, because the first key step in moving forward with implementing the management plan is getting this license updated. And so we know we need to do that. We've now heard back from the ministry. And I think that the third option might be something that we would want to consider before we go out to public engagement. Not that we don't want to talk with the public, but there is a lot of staff time and cost involved in doing that, as well as trying to incorporate that into the work plan. So I could see a lot of delays if we decided to take that as our next step. The other thing I would suggest is that if we look at option 3, which is basically to respond to the ministry to say that we're going to come up with a communication plan. So instead of a regulatory bylaw, we will lay out all of the rules of engagement for the log train trail in a communication plan. And we do that, and we're going to promote that, because in essence, whether we are codifying it in law or just communicating it through brochures and communication campaign to the public, our intent is to try to get everyone to behave as well as possible and play well with each other on the trail. So I could suggest that we consider option 3 first before we move forward with doing public engagement about a regulatory bylaw as a first step, because we don't know what the ministry is going to say. It's very likely they might say that's not enough. Please move forward with the regulatory bylaw. But if we say we do not have support at this time from the board to do so, or from the committee, and we would like to try a communication campaign, they may accept that as an adequate enforcement plan. We don't know, but we did want to bring this up because there are pros and cons to all of these options. So I just wanted to put that forward as some food for thought.
Thank you, Jenny. Director Coots, then Director Boyko, then Director Sparrow. Please go ahead, Director Coots.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, I just have a question of clarification for myself so I understand that I'm interpreting this correctly. I wholeheartedly agree that if we're going to be making a bylaw change or large decisions like that, it must go back to the public. They are a huge piece into why we're even doing this. But I worry, if I'm not understanding it correctly, if we go through that whole process, bring it back to the public, and they tell us no, which we're surmising at this rate, is that a legislative requirement that the ministry is telling us? And are they going to potentially turn around and tell us that it doesn't matter what the public wants in that regard when it comes to enforcement? And through the chair, thank you, Jenny, that comment on potentially just having the public notice being considered enforcement, I didn't even consider, and that makes me a little bit more positive possibly in the potential of this. I think it's a great idea. I think it's wonderful. As we've stated, the public is really wanting this, and it's a wonderful opportunity for us to be listening and for the public to be involved. I just wouldn't want to bring it back to the public, have them feel that we're doing everything that we can, and that by bringing it to them and asking whether or not we want it, we're saying that, oh yeah, no, if you say no, it just won't happen. But then we get turned around and told by the ministry that no, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have 100% agreeance and everybody that votes that they don't want it, you still have to do it.
Yeah, I think going through the public engagement process could be challenging at this time, because we just don't know what the province's answer is going to be, whether we choose a regulatory bylaw or not. So like the option 3, where we inform the province that we don't have intentions of developing a regulatory bylaw at this time, or have support for that, and then getting their response would preferably be better. And then we could go to the public and say, the province is saying we have to, or else they can't update the lease. As opposed to right now, we just don't have a lot from the province to stand on for public engagement.
Thank you, Director Boyko.
Thank you. I agree with what Director Coots just said there. We have the direction from the public, and if we're going to change something, we definitely should hear from them again. My question would be more to what Jenny just said, is we're going to send let me just read it here. Communication campaign. So I'd like to explore this a little bit before we start voting on things here. What would be a communication campaign? I know we talked about signage that says, and we had ATV BC has something very good that says, you know, wheels before heels kind of thing. And there's a very strict hierarchy of how things go on the trail. Basically, if you're driving your quad on there and you see a horse, you stop, you pull over, you turn it off, you let the horse go by, say, hey, how you doing? Have a great day. Same thing if you're riding a bicycle. If you're riding a bicycle and you see a horse come by, you pull over, you stop, and things like that. So it's very respectfully laid out. So I just want to talk about this communication campaign. Are we going to say, hey, we're motorizing it, and this is the etiquette to follow, and here's a very simple sign, like 3 points, done, and carry forward. So I'd like to explore that a bit more. Thank you.
Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you. So I'd say the vision for the communications campaign is like currently there's a bit of uncertainty about like the status of motorized use on the trail. So to clear that up, we're still operating under the 1993 lease and management plan, which is non-motorized use. People have said that they've seen an increase in motorized use since we've updated the management plan, although we haven't updated the lease. So if we were able to update the lease without a regulatory bylaw, then we would inform the public, this update has taken effect. This is the expectation. This is the allowable uses. And like you said, this is the etiquette, yielding to horses and bicycles. And, this is the expected, speeds. And these are some of the, dangers and concerns that we'd like you to be aware of. But that would not be backed by a regulatory campaign. So any non-compliance to those, suggestions in the communication campaign, we don't have a regulation tool to address it. It would just be more education and more communication to try to address that.
Thank you, Director Sparrow.
Thank you for that. And Director Boyko was talking about places to offload vehicles and mentioned Maybell and Mozart. Maybell and Mozart is not part of our area of the log. Our area starts at 3 kilometers. I'm always wondering if that is exactly at the corner of Chase's farm or the 3 kilometer LT sign is, which is about 200 feet towards Tower. The different areas. So anything past that is not our lease area. So maybe Mozart. Also, if we go to McLean's Mill, the drop off area suggested that's not our property. I have to go through city property and Mosaic property to get to the log trip. So there'll be also be issues there getting through the part of people who want to go. So
yeah, so the Ministry of Transportation owned section is not the power line specifically, but the power line corridor. So there's a forested area with a road right away at the end of the power line corridor, and then it turns into the field. So part of it would be signage, delineating that section where it's no longer UCRD owned and managed or Ministry of Transportation owned and managed. The Maybell Mozart area is Mosaic. It goes up to Mosaic for the first 3 kilometers of the trail, and then it goes out to Wolsey Road. So really our managed section of the trail, we only have 4 connections to road right away. There's Wolsey at the very end, Desmond Road, Horn Lake Road, and so then, but lots of people do access it through McLean Mill site. They go through the city-owned property of McLean Mill to Mosaic, and then up to the.
I just want to say at the present time that motorized vehicles are not allowed on city property or trails. Director Siga.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I would prefer to go back to rather than putting a bylaw in or do all of this expensive work, put it back to the ministry to say the motorized use idea with the increased information. And now that I'm thinking about it, like if the city does not allow motorized vehicles on their trail, their piece of this trail, and Mosaic does not allow motorized vehicles on their piece of this trail, should ACRD be involved in this piece of the trail? Should we renew the lease? Should this be put into the hands of a motorized vehicle interest group that's actually interested in that trail? Just in terms of the expense and general usage. I'm just thinking about these things and like how we've gotten to this point here. But yeah, option 3, I think is the first way to go here. Thanks.
Have any comments on that, Michael, or response? Okay. Director Roth and Director Boyko, please go ahead, Director Roth.
Thank you. I walk McLean Mill quite often, every week at least, and I see motorized vehicles going up to the log train trail every time. There's lots of them. So how does this city enforce their bylaw not to have motorized vehicles on their property? Because it happens all the time. So what do they do? Like, how does that work?
At this time, as far as I know, they're told to leave.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
like by the
simple as
part, the person that stays there, okay. So that, I guess you don't have to have that arranged with the ministry. It's different.
I can't answer that.
Okay.
Director Boyko?
Thank you, Chair. I'm leaning towards option 3 as well, send it back to the province, but I do agree with Director Siga just said is why are we even getting involved with this in the first place? This is getting to be a monster and a animal. The people, you can obviously see that there is a need and a want from the public to use this as motorized. We're seeing ever since we announced this year and a half ago that this is the path that the people want and the board supported listening to the people that we want to have the same motorized use is increasing. People want to do it and it's going to happen. And we're not going to sit out there with signs and blockades because people are just going to move out of the way and say, why is the ACRD even here? So we need to seriously examine why we're even trying to get into this in the first place. But for now, I say send this back to the province and let's move forward. Thank you.
Okay, we do have a motion on the floor. Did you want to continue with that motion, Director Roth?
I can hear. I have no problem withdrawing it.
Do you agree to withdraw the motion, Director Boyko? Okay, so the motion has been withdrawn. Did you want to make a new motion, Director Roth?
Sure. I'll make it to go with option 3, please.
Do we have a seconder? Moved by Director Roth, seconded by Director Siga. Any other discussion? I'm just going to make a comment. I think there's a real opportunity here to make some compromises between the motorized vehicles and the non-motorized vehicles of the log train trail. I think Director Boyko and his community are very respectful users of the log train trail. However, there is a small group out there who are not very respectful, and they continue to terrorize a small neighborhood, residential neighborhood in Cherry Creek, and those residents are really suffering. So we have to deal with that if we're going to allow ATV users on the log train trail in the residential neighborhood. So did you want to have a final comment, Director Boyko, before I call the question?
Just a final comment. I think we all agree that the majority of people, motorized, non-motorized, bicyclists, hikers, horse people, everybody out there, they're all going to be great people. They're all using fine etiquette, and there's always going to be someone that's been a problem out there. So currently what's happening is there is the local people in Cherry Creek and Beaufort, because that's where this trail actually is, are managing things themselves on how to take care of, and you can see the things online that are happening, that this kid on this quad went down here. We found the parents and this is not going to happen again. So currently that's already happening. And listening to the public and encouraging a good neighbor policy is going to be the way to go forward. Thank you. And it's already taken place.
Okay, any final comments before I call for the question? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion is carried. So good luck, Michael. I look forward to hearing what the province's reply is going to be. Thank you so much. Next is reports, ACRD procurement policy discussion. Shane, please go ahead and start the report.
Thank you, everyone. So this report and a subsequent presentation is provided to the committee with the goal of receiving feedback and some discussion around the ACRD's existing purchasing policy and proposed inclusions and changes. I will note we do use purchasing and procurement interchangeably. So These details stem from the ACRD's 2021 to 2024 strategic plan, which discussed the implementation of social procurement, as well as organizational and market changes since the adoption of the current policy, which was originally adopted in 2013, which includes inflationary and digital pressures coupled with the desire to achieve better overall value, as well as a change in the ACRD structure. I just want to make sure, are you okay if I share my screen for the presentation? You got it. Thank you. Wonderful. So today we'll be giving you a high-level overview of the existing purchasing policy, which is also attached to the agenda report. We'll introduce and discuss proposed updates and additions. For these sections, I do want to note that operational updates such as clarifying language and receival and opening of project documents have been excluded. Our goal with these operational items are to bring them with the draft policy for board review. Staff have reviewed a sample of other regional district purchasing policies, as well as held discussions with our management group to better align the proposed updates and additions. Now for the presentation, after each slide or group of slides, I will open it up to questions, discussions, and any other additional input. We will then discuss next steps and kind of end with final closing questions. After today's meeting, a survey inclusive of the options as discussed here today and presented will be issued to ACRD staff and board members before a draft policy is brought forward. So looking at our current policy, as noted, it was originally adopted in 2013, and there's been no amendments processed since that adoption. The approval limits are reflective of the staff makeup during that time. It requires that written quotes for most purchases under $35,000, as well as a tender or request for proposal purchases above. It speaks to a decentralized procurement process in which the ACRD now has a centralized process, and there are no directive social initiatives included in that policy. So first item that's up is an update to the roles and responsibilities, in which since the creation of general managers along with the procurement coordinator role, we recommend updating to better reflect the differing levels and responsibilities within our organization. We're proposing that the general manager level be responsible for ensuring that their department is compliant with the policy, while the procurement coordinator will ensure the administration of this policy is upheld, as well as acting as a final compliance check within this policy. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And if there is no feedback, I'll just keep on rolling. So.
Any questions? Seeing none, please go ahead, Shane.
Thank you. Next up is we'd like to introduce the addition of purchasing principles, which will aid and guide staff in decision-making when we are looking at purchasing. Some of the ones that we're hoping to include are efficiency, which is ensuring efficient and cost-effective purchasing, acting lawfully, acting ethically, ensuring open and transparent processes, being accountable, being impartial, ensuring that no bias is present or acted upon, acting economical, considering the entire life cycle cost of the purchase, as well as social, which is considering the social and environmental impacts of each of our purchases.
Any questions? Please go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, Director Beckett has his hand up. Please go ahead, Director Beckett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, and we may see this in the next slide, but with respect to social, perhaps economical, where do we stand on purchasing from the states at this point in time, given the situation south of the border?
Thank you. That is a fantastic question. So at a management level, we have decided every chance possible where we can switch from a US provider to a Canadian supplier, we have. that was inclusive of our recent vehicle that we purchased, ensuring that the vehicle was manufactured in Canada. As we move through the presentation, there's a little bit of discussion within the social area, which speaks directly to local, which I think will help drive that stronger definition of what local is and ensuring that we're purchasing from Canadian suppliers.
So thank you for that explanation, Madam Chair. If I could just follow up, completely supportive of taking that direction. But again, under the social economic aspect of the purchasing principles, at what point do we and how do you factor in the expense? And I'll use a vehicle. We buy a Canadian vehicle for X amount of dollars. What percentage more would be acceptable to the board and to our community at whole? Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's probably a great discussion once we get to that local slide and we are talking about what thresholds should be in place. I will say to date, we have seen that switch to Canadian suppliers. While there's a little bit more work upfront with establishing some of those relationships from our longer term suppliers, we have seen cost savings in the longer run with them as we build those relationships as well.
Director Siga, did you have your hand up? I see that it's down now. Did you
I
have a
did, but it
question?
was answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Seeing no more questions, please go ahead, Shane.
Thank you. So the next section that we're looking at adding is really a combination of language from our existing policy, looking at prohibitions. So the purpose of this section is to prohibit the dividing of contracts to mitigate any thresholds within the policy or trade agreements. I do have an asterisk next to that one because I do want to note within our policy, staff would recommend once we get through the social and local sections that local and social procurement goals and targets may be able to be adjusted for this prohibition to allow for local suppliers and social entities to benefit from splitting, obviously within our regulatory trade agreement requirements. It also speaks to ensuring appropriate authority levels and financial plan expenditure approvals are met. Happy to answer any questions.
Director Spera.
Thank you. When you said the local, do you mean like local valley, local island, or local BC? Or how do you define what a local supplier is?
I think that's coming up and there'll be a big discussion. There's so many definitions of local. Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. So prohibition, dividing a contract so that they're under the threshold will be prohibited. What about how do you want to say this? Something that comes in under the threshold, but there's multiple add-ons to put it over the threshold. How is that addressed? Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of items that are coming in underneath, and then I'm assuming speaking to change orders specifically with those rising above, our current process is to obviously if we have those limits that are within board approval, we would bring it back for board A approval. We do have a slide coming up after the expenditure limit section, which is going to speak directly to change orders, as well as provide a little bit more recommendation as to how those are processed and limits and variabilities within those. It's a bit of a gray area at times as well, because we have to be specific whether the change order is directive to what's actually going on, or if it's an additional scope of work that was added outside of the originally issued purchase.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Please go ahead, Shane.
Thank you. So now we're moving into a great section. So this is the next few slides are going to speak to social, indigenous, and environmental purchasing considerations. Great. So the first one, we would like direction and a discussion around what the ACRD should consider as local. So what does local entail to the ACRD region? Does it include the Central Island? Does it include the entire Vancouver Island? Our goal here is to really have a well-defined definition of local to be applied throughout our purchasing policy and help drive staff when we are purchasing. I do want to note, per the BC Social Procurement Initiative, which now operates as Biosocial Canada, they do state that locally sourced construction jobs create roughly 1.2 to 2 times more jobs than a non-local company would through that process. And happy to answer any questions.
Please go ahead, Director Sparrow. I told you it was coming up.
Thank you. So when I see local, and I think, if you look at the valley here, we're local here, but if we're up to Tofino, local would be people in the Tofino area. If you're Ucluelet, it'd be the local one to Ucluelet here, but we're a regional district. So is it the regional district wide, or is it the valley wide, or is it the island wide? So I'm going to go more with the island wide, because we can't say local Tofino the same as local Ucluelet, the same as local Port Alberni. So yeah, we're local people like this. But anyway, so I'd like to see a bigger definition of local, just because we are regional district and not a city of island. Anyway, anybody else any ideas?
In last council, we had a councillor that's very adamant that we only contract to local, which he referred to as Port Alberni. However, that has a side effect. So for example, if we only give local contractors work, and you don't look at, say, somebody from Parksville, then when a job in Parksville comes up, they retaliate and say, well, we're not going to hire a contractor from Port Alberni. So that really tends to hurt the local businesses more than saying just Port Alberni or just Alberni-Quayquat Regional District, than by keeping it a little bit more open. And I agree, some people say local is within your community. Some people say Vancouver Island. Some people say Canada is local, buying services and goods through Canada, that's considered local. So there's so many definitions, but in my opinion, I think Vancouver Island is a good area that we can consider purchasing local. Vancouver Island Economic Alliance has an Island Good project, and they really promote buying any goods from Vancouver Island, and that's what they consider local. My question for you, Shane, have you looked at other areas? What do they consider as being local?
Yes, thank you. And that is something that we did struggle with when we were looking at other regional district policies, is local was not defined in a manner that we felt was clear. And I think that's something that we really want to have in our policy, because there is room for interpretation. And as we've just seen, everybody has a little bit of a different interpretation of what that is. So
just one comment before I go to the people raise their hand. The city has hired a contractor for out of town, but when he does a project in Port Alberni, he hires local contractors and local tradespeople to do the work. So is that local or not local? So there's so many variances here. I don't know who had the hand raised first. We'll go to Director Boyko, then Director Siga. Please go ahead, Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. If you focus on only hiring from Port Alberni, you're going to have multiple problems on multiple fronts. You're going to have one person and only one person that's local and registered locally that can do the work, and you're going to have higher prices. So focusing on exactly where you come from, I don't think it really matters. We can say that's local as close as we can get it geographically, but still be able to get 3 quotes that are valid for each thing that we're doing and just move on, because it's not going to happen. And I've done lots of work based in Tofino, and there is nothing that you can really get. There's very few contractors in Tofino. So if you say, oh, we want to have someone from there, it's not going to, you're wasting your time. So I think we should just try and say, we're trying to get it local, keep it as generic as possible, and move on, just so we can get the best price and bang for the buck for the taxpayers that were spending their money. Thank you.
City just hired a contractor out of Ucluelet, and they were also the best price. Go ahead, Director Siga.
Thank you for your last comment. I appreciate it. And when we have bids on projects, there is a schedule of basically rating the bid on a schedule. And can we not have value placed on how close it is to the actual place that the supply is coming from? So, and also include a point of whether they will be employing locally. Just sort of have a weighted scale of distance from where you're procuring from.
And we do have a rating system, do we not? Can you maybe just explain that a bit?
Thank you. Yeah, so that is something that staff have discussed in detail. So there is the ability to do a scaled weighting method. For instance, if you're 50 kilometers away, you get X points, and if you're 100 kilometers away, you get X points. We do have to be a little bit careful once we get up into those trade agreement limits, because we don't want to be in violation of any of those, obviously, as we are awarding the contracts. But that is something that we have discussed, and is something that we could implement if that's what the committee and the subsequent board would like to do.
Any other questions or comments? Director Beckett and then Director Lecourcier. Please go ahead, Director Beckett.
Thank you. Great discussion. You know, the one thing, and I am a proponent for, you know, trying to hire locally, and you know, Vancouver Island to me is, you know, I would consider local. At the end of the day, and again, I'm sorry, I'm digressing for a second. You know, I like having the scoring systems in place that allow staff to, you know, select the appropriate individual. But clearly, at the end of the day, you know, while price is important, having the quality of work that will you know, assure that whatever we're bidding on, or whatever we're asking folks to bid on, will give us the best product at the end of the day. So, you know, I'm not going to bring someone into Banfield to do my roof if it's a fraction of the cost, but I know that it's not going to hold up. That just doesn't make any sense. It may last for a couple of years. I'd rather get something that's going to last me, you know, 20 years. But anyway, yeah, I think for me, we do have to be careful that we're getting the best possible product at the end of the day as well.
100% agree. The lowest price is not always the best value. Director Lecourcier, please go ahead.
It's hard to be just local, because sometimes you need special work done and nobody locally can do it. So I really like the idea of defining local as Vancouver Island. It keeps it close to home, and yet it gives us the opportunity to get maybe somebody more qualified, say from Nanaimo, to do the job. So I would support the idea of Vancouver Island be called local.
Is there a general consensus among the board to define Vancouver Island as local? Okay, lots of thumbs up, so perfect, and heads nodding. And I would also like to see you continue with the scoring system. I think that's very helpful. Any other comments or questions before we move on? Fantastic, please go ahead.
So thank you, everyone. That's fantastic. So next we're going to speak to defining social procurement and a social enterprise. This is going to really drive us into our next section, where we're speaking to what social initiatives we're after. So we'd like to look at social procurement as a practice that seeks to leverage existing activities to achieve positive social outcomes, which include environmental, social, and economic benefits that align with our community values and strategic objectives. Further, we'd like to define a social enterprise as an organization that uses its strategy to achieve social, cultural, or environmental objectives. We'd like to characterize it by an entity that reinvests 51% or more of its profits into their social mission.
Any comments? When I was first elected to council, there were social procurement workshops offered, because this is a very new concept, and it was spearheaded initially by the then Tofino Mayor Josie Osborne and ex-mayor Victoria Lisa Helps, and they started this project, and they offered great workshops. If Rudy to give you an idea what social procurement was, and Terry was there as well. And since then, I've really bought into social procurement just because it makes so much sense. Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. So I agree that we should have some social procurement here, but this statement of reinvesting majority 51% or more profits into their social mission. I got a problem with that. And us telling a company how to spend their profits so that they can work for the government, I think there's a problem with that. And are we expecting the people that work for the government, the ACRD, to submit in their financial documents to say, hey, I made, $50 profit this month and I spent $26 on some social mission? I want to look into that because I don't think we should specify they should spend 51% or more of profits on social mission where that's very ambiguous and not defined. And as a business owner, I wouldn't want to share that with anybody anyways. So how are we actually going to work on that? Thank you.
I actually agree with you a little bit. I think 50%, defining that 50% may be too extensive. Maybe if you just change the wording that they support social enterprise or something like that, and they have to show that they support social enterprises. Would that be agreeable to the board, or what do you think of that, Shane? Just change the wording a bit?
No, I was going to say that is, I think, a great addition to it. And then just to speak on Director Boyko's comment on how would we confirm that, I think it's on our end as simple as when we do have a public process and they are submitting or are looking at purchasing from them, is they would have to submit a letter to us, very simple letter saying that they do meet our definition of a social enterprise. But I think a great update. Thank you.
Daniel?
And I think it's also important just to distinguish that there is a difference between the social procurement and the social enterprise. So our trade agreements allow government to direct award to social enterprises. And so there are definitions of what a social enterprise is that are also outside of our hands. So it's just to bear in mind that a social enterprise is simply a category of business that we can work with versus the social procurement process is how we value certain aspects so that when we do put things out to tender, we are valuing those social elements. I'm using a very broad definition of social element in there. And it's that value that then contributes to the best value contract that we issue. So I just want to make sure we're not mixing up the two. And it could be that our social procurement does not end up employing a social enterprise. And so I just want to make sure that we're teasing those two clearly apart.
Thank you for that clarification. Director Becker.
Thank you. I'm looking at, social procurement for dummies, and I'm pointing that at myself because, it's great to have these definitions and all of this great stuff. But I happen to agree with Director Boyko that I guess when I look at the communities that I've resided in, and I'm very active in those communities, I'm looking at a business that provides to the local sports teams, provides to the performing arts, gives back in many ways. And there's, some outfits, large and small, that don't invest in the community other than having a product or, hiring some people, which is great. But, again, we all know who in our community gives back to our community. And to me, I'm looking for a definition that's a little bit more simpler that speaks to that sense of community. And I know I'm not articulating that really, really well, but these definitions, I'm not sure that I can buy into them as opposed to something more simpler that speaks to sense of community. Thank you.
Dr. Sparrow.
Thank you. Yeah, I was on the same line as Director Beckett there. When it says social, I assume that means to like putting money towards a hockey team, soccer team. And cultural aspects to do with culture of the community and environmental objectives. Well, if you were doing a lot of recycling in your area as opposed to a person not doing recycling, that would be an environmental objective according to LIP.
Thank you. So I think, yes and no. So that is what's going to lead us into the conversation about what does the committee and the board want to see as their objectives for the community, which is on the next couple slides. So once we have that direction, we'll be able to focus our social procurement activities and subsequent metrics as to what is driving that and what the committee and the board would like. So it doesn't have to be, it's not specific in the nature right now, because we haven't set any expectations at this level. But the goal is to set those expectations and have the board drive what those social, environmental, and economic benefits are, which will lead our social procurement efforts. So
You're always ahead of us, Mike. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So, if we define local as Vancouver Island and social as putting in towards, say, sports club, that, and then environmental objectives could be recycling, or it could be other things. So, it's going to get very onerous on the person putting a quote in and or trying to push his objectives. If they do them the profits, well, yeah, that's kind of a lot of money. Then, so I get the idea where you're trying to push, but the stride would be too long at this time. Thank you.
Director Siga.
I don't think it'll be too onerous. I mean, you get used to a system of doing your procurement. And if you've got a checklist with all of these lenses, it sort of covers your bases and helps you make the correct decision. So I think this is a really good process and a good document.
Any other comments or questions before we go on to the next slide? Okay, please go ahead, Shane.
thank you. So now we're going to be looking at some social initiatives. So we provided a preliminary list of kind of overarching social initiatives for reference, some of which include healthcare and growing capacity, housing needs and development, local skill development and training opportunities, employment for people facing barriers. Now we're hoping to get some feedback, and not specifically around these, but just what you feel the community in our region should be looking at when we're looking at our social initiatives. And the goal is, once we receive the feedback, our intent is to apply and track metrics for each initiative, ensuring that the implementation and continuity of these metrics are held as we award contracts and expend those funds. The overall goal is to achieve more community value and a better overall value for each dollar spent. The BC Social Procurement Initiative, which I noted is now by Social Canada, states that every dollar spent on a local business, the local community receives between 63 and 67 cents reinvested locally, as where if you're buying at a big box retailer, about only 14 cents is reinvested locally. Happy to open it up. Thank you.
I have a question, Shane. One thing I learned in social procurement in the workshops that I took, that there were 3 demographics that were faced higher unemployment than other demographics. And those 3 demographics were females, youth, and First Nations. So would that be considered people facing barriers? Would that be in that category?
Yes, the government has a defined listing, which includes all those 3 groups, and it is ever changing, which is typically why we like to reference just the Human Rights Commission, because it does change, it does get updated, but it does include those 3 groups, and I believe a few more now.
Director Boyko?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So my question is this: I think we can all agree that some social initiatives are great, improve the economy, improve the community, that kind of thing, reinvest money. How much time are we predicting that staff will be putting towards this tracking that you're talking about of, did the person say that they did what they're going to do? And are we going to be looking at hiring more staff in the procurement department just to track these social initiatives? Because I think that's where we're going with the next conversation here. Thank you.
Thank you. Our plan is definitely not to hire more procurement staff. We believe that these initiatives and tracking metrics can easily be integrated into our current processes, such as having vendors submit the details with their monthly invoices, as well as doing final project closeout reports that are simply sent to us, and we have a checklist and they're either met or not met. So we feel it's very minimal, and we do also feel the value that we're getting back from these potential initiatives will far outweigh that small additional staff time.
Director Sparrow.
Thank you. I'm looking at the list here and the last two have got me a little confused. Well, living wage is obviously the base wage. I assume of where the person is going to live, not having the value of it. If they're Victoria based county, their living wage, their area, this could be different. Agriculture. Can you define that a bit closer?
Happy to. So agriculture, I think we're really looking towards food security, supporting our local growers within our community, however you would like to define that, as well as supporting agriculture initiatives, which I believe really tie in to something like our grant program with the greenhouse program where we had students from North Island College. So agriculture, yes, it is, but I believe it's also intertwined with training opportunities and skill development as well.
Daniel, please go ahead.
And to add to how this can be used in a contract. So we don't prescribe, we ask questions that allow people to self-identify. And it becomes a lot easier that way for more companies to be able to express what it is in one of these categories that they are active in. And it could be that there are some companies that have no impact on agriculture, but a lot in terms of housing and living wage or people facing barriers. So what happens is when they reply to a quote, they're identifying on a larger list and we're simply scoring and considering that in the overall value. And so agriculture might be something that local caterers actually tap into. And if we were to, we do a lot of catering contracts, we do them one at a time. If we wanted, we could actually do annual catering contracts and have a larger sort of overall guaranteed contract that people bid on, where they're saying, hey, we're using this amount of food sourced from either local outfits or First Nations. And so, you know, if we wanted to value, we would come out with examples of how we could potentially, or how we would ask the question to allow people to self-identify. So each one of these areas has a sort of a unique way of being recognized. What we try and do is ask good questions and then stand out of the way and allow people to explain.
Shane, if you're putting out an RFP, would the RFP include these initiatives, and then they can identify and explain in more detail once they know what the criteria are?
Yeah, so if we do at the committee and board level, if we do set goals, we would then include those on our publicly posted projects, and then staff would essentially score based on the submission or the vendor on that side, how they do respond to that. I will also note too that the social procurement is a newer process, but we have been including some very high level questions just to get feedback from our vendors as we work through. And I do see in the industry it is becoming more usual for vendors to submit high level responses as more organizations are implementing these. So,
thank you, Director DeCourcier.
I'm just thinking of the size of contracts. There's some contracts that are pretty small and you require all these conditions for a small contract. So is there a size contract? Say, for example, if it's greater than $100,000, then you have more conditions, and if it's less than you have fewer conditions?
Shane, please go ahead. That's a good question.
Thank you. So that's usually always going to be assessed based on what the actual contract is. If we're going out for something like a vehicle purchase, again, like I mentioned, local. But if we're going out for a landscaping contract, even though it may be small in value, we may want to include some of these in terms of them hiring local, if that is a desire of the board, or providing training through apprenticeship programs to high school students. So it is to some level on a case-by-case basis. It is very hard to put a set expenditure limit on it, because there is so much variability across all the purchasing that we do.
Any other questions or comments before I move on? I love this discussion. It's great. Go ahead, Shane.
Thank you. So our next proposed addition, in addition to social purchasing, staff are proposing Indigenous focused purchasing be included. This looks to prioritize purchasing from Indigenous businesses, contributing to socioeconomic reconciliation and supporting long-term economic relationships. This does support the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's call to action number 92. And I am just going to pop over to the next slide quickly as well. Staff have also recommended seeking to increase opportunities for Indigenous employment, training, contracting, and subcontracting.
Thank you, Director Boyko.
Thank you very much. Can you go back one slide, please? So prioritizing purchases from Indigenous businesses, I think we can all say that we all want to support Indigenous businesses, but prioritizing above other things, I think could be problematic because you want to make sure that we're still getting a bang for a buck and things like this. So how are we going to, is it going to be a ranking system that says, okay, we get Indigenous company supplying things, boom, they have a little bit of experience, but these guys have more experience. Like, how are we going to put all this together? And is there going to be a ranking system for that, and how do we define what an Indigenous business is? Is it something that's locally owned by one of the First Nations in the ACRD catchment area, or is it someone that is potentially from Métis ancestry from somewhere else? Like, I just want a bit more information on this. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think in terms of prioritization, I agree with your comment. Again, I think it would be on one of those case-by-case situations. If we're looking for cultural training for staff, I think a Indigenous business would definitely be prioritized. If we're looking in the broader scope of projects, again, I'll reference something like landscaping. I believe it would be in staff's best interest to apply a percentage or a weighting as well. Again, we'd also always want to consider the traditional territories that we are operating on. And then as well, to your second point about the region, I would leave that up to the committee and the subsequent board to determine if there's a preference for which groups they would like to prioritize, if that is the direction that we'd like to go.
That was going to be my comment, Shane, is I'm wondering if maybe instead of purchasing from Indigenous businesses, if you could put a percentage on that, because a lot of businesses that First Nation might own 30%, for example. So if you could put a percentage on it, or just leave it as is, or say partially owned by Indigenous business, something to that effect, maybe. Director Coots.
Thank you, Madam Chair. More just a little bit of a comment. I think in the light of not taking positions that aren't on us, I don't see it being a good idea to attempt to define what or who is Indigenous as the ACRD. So I think for what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If we're defining local as Vancouver Island, I think that if we're wanting to keep them local Indigenous businesses, it just encompasses the entire Toronto nations because they're on the island. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment. I like it. Dr. Sparrow.
So an Indigenous business would be one that is owned and operated with Indigenous participation, as opposed to an employee to be part of inside of it. If I had 20 employees, some of them could be Indigenous. Part of this, but it wouldn't be owned business. How are you going to separate those?
I definitely think that's something that we're going to have to work through as we go through this process and get more feedback. And again, if that's something that the committee would like us to look at in greater detail, then that's something that we can dive back into and work with Bi-Social Canada as well, as they have lots of background with this, and work to come up with a solution that's going to fit us best.
Yeah, another good comment. Any questions or comments? Please go ahead, Shane.
Thank you. So the final section of this section is environmental considerations. So the committee could consider environmental considerations, some of which could include reducing greenhouse gas emissions, increasing energy efficiency, and waste reduction practices. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments on environmental considerations? Director Sparrow.
How do you plan on tracking this unless you have somebody that does a carbon capture equivalency inside their program? Or does hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, and how do you reduce weight? I think because in Cherry Creek, you know, there is no recycling program, but the city there is, the Lionel there is, Victoria there is. So would that be considered reducing weight by your definition?
So again, I think we definitely like to leave it up to the vendor, but I think we would provide them direction in each area. So to pick on reduced greenhouse gas emissions, for instance, we could set a threshold of maybe 25% of their vehicle fleet is running off electric emissions only. That would then allow the vendor to fill that out, yes or no, and then that would provide us guidance back to score it. As well, we could leave it up to them to describe their waste reduction practices that they operate in their business. We could review that information and assign a score to that based on what they have provided to us. So again, it's really at our discretion and what the committee and or the board would like to see.
Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. I would caution against putting numbers on electric vehicles because until we have the actual charging infrastructure and the electric power in British Columbia, that we're not importing it from other places that are burning greenhouse gases, making that statement, I think, is problematic. If you're going to take an electric car from here to Tofino and back and forth and use it for commercial purposes and that, you're going to have lots of problem with charging because there's nowhere in the middle. So putting a number on that, I think, at our level is problematic until the electric vehicle gets mature and there's charging stations around. I have a question though. Increasing biodiversity, how does that actually affect the improvement of the ACRD for people that are doing things out there? They're doing construction for this. How is that even relevant? Thank you.
That was one of the provided examples from Biosocial Canada. Again, it's just one of the options if we're looking at, for example, a landscaping company and looking at what they offer and what their options are to plant within our region, specifically maybe even native plants. That's mostly what that option speaks to. But again, they are just a list of examples and could be expanded or decreased. So.
Daniel, please go ahead.
Just to add to that, and some of this, Director Boyko, is sort of on the periphery of different types of procurements that we may come across over time. And I'll step sideways away from the electric, but using examples that I had in Qualicum Beach with social procurement and environmental, the board there, when the town went out for a new backhoe. They really put a lot of attention into the engine systems. Was it hybrid? Was it not? What were the forecasted GHG emissions for the vehicle? Albeit it was not a fully electric vehicle. They did not want to do that because they didn't see it as feasible for the community. They did go towards operating systems that were estimated to have lower GHGs, and they accepted a value on that what was a higher price at the time. So that was something that they factored in. With biodiversity, a great example there is with all the waterfront works that can take place. When there are projects, sometimes they're road projects, work has to be done, and it's in a setback. And so looking at the type of plants that are being put in there, looking at the type of vehicles that legally can or won't operate in that environment, are all things that are factored into a company's ability to actually deliver that in a cost-effective way. And so it isn't the entirety of the contract, but it's considered as part of the contract.
I'll just make a quick comment. We have a family-owned trucking business, and we haven't gone to electric vehicles because it's hugely expensive to replace trucks with electric vehicles, and they're not exactly up to the high standard that they need for their operations, but they do practice the other things. So, and a scoring system, I think, would still be okay if you don't have electric vehicles. So again, these are just guidelines, I'm assuming, and it will be scored accordingly. Just to Director Siga.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this, like, you have to put this within the context of all the other lenses. And, you know, if you're having a contract for, like, maintaining a gardened area, if you're going with local species and ensuring that you're not interfering with, any of the, wildlife, I think that's an important consideration. Whereas in, you know, if you're having a load of paper towel delivered, it's a totally different thing. Thanks. Well, no, I suppose biodiversity has to do with paper towel. Sorry.
Any other questions or comments? Please go ahead.
Thank you. So next we're going to be talking about the updates to the purchasing authority thresholds and methods section of our current policy. So we have provided some proposed increases to the overall authority levels with the hopes of reducing bottlenecks, allowing staff the ability to better align purchases with their departmental needs and our organizational setup. The limit increase for the CAO's approval limit is to 75,000, while adding in sublimits for the CFO and general manager levels, with smaller increases for other staff. With the proposed increase of board approval to $75,000, staff would also recommend that bylaw 1085, which is the delegation bylaw, to reflect the monthly delegation report out for the signed contracts over 35 to allow for this continued transparency, which comes out monthly, which is actually attached on the board agenda today.
Thank you, Director Boyko.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. We discussed increasing the CAO's expenditures about 4 months ago, and we all voted it down. We wanted to keep it at $35,000. So what has changed? Why are we now bringing this back to the board to almost triple this number? Because we have already said we do not support this. Thank you.
We're all looking puzzled.
Yes,
Shane?
Fred, sorry, like I'm, to the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware of any voting down or any discussion around this approval limit.
Daniel?
Yeah, Fred, I do recall we had a discussion, but I don't think there was anything to vote on. I'd have to double check it. It's not coming to mind. I thought we had talked about it along the lines of, have to remember the example. I do recall a periphery discussion around it, but I don't recall it being the center of our discussion point. Either way, I will issue that, you know, this is, you know, at the end of the day, it's for the board's consideration, and no is an okay answer. We're just sort of flagging based on structure. And there's, yeah, it's just a revisit and discussion.
Director Sparrow, then Director Siga.
Thank you. I think the $35,000 is the limit you have, and we talked about a $48,000 vehicle. And that was part of the discussion. You couldn't do it by yourself without any board discussion because of your limitations being imposed upon you. I'll be this where it went. Under $50,000. So yeah, I've been caught by this before where I've had very low limits in my previous years. And it is very restrictive sometimes. The one I'm looking at the top line. So any regional staff is directed by the supervisor to $5,000. That means anybody in the front office or the things up to $5,000 without the supervisor signature or as directed by the supervisor. So they still have to give some sort of direction to them to buy it. Okay. Yeah, because when's the last time this was actually put in place? 45,000 for CAO. When was that enacted? What year?
That was put into place in 2013.
That's what it says in the meeting policy. So that we're now 12 years. That's a lot of time. So things have increased. It should almost be done to a percentage. So as you know, with CPI +1. So as things go up, so does the numbers go up. Otherwise, 10 years from now, you can be handicapped again by not being able to do things you want to do the way you want to do.
The only reason why I wouldn't want to see a CPI is that it becomes very hard to make sure that the board is familiar and the public is familiar with those limits. And what we want to do through this as well is to make sure that people trust the system that's there, is transparent, and with a sliding scale over time that isn't properly reported. And I'm not saying we wouldn't, but it just adds a risk. People start saying, well, I thought your limit was, 37.5, and now you said prove something it's 39. Why and how? And it would be something that I think could be a little too nebulous versus a hard line that we revisit periodically. And operationally, the difference would be, just so the board understands, and we're not bringing a comprehensive report here, but the difference would be there'd be fewer board reports in terms of the number of reports that we see at 35 and up. So there's a little bit less work there. The one consideration I'd want the board to think about is just right now, I am the sole bottleneck, and a lot of our purchase over 35,000, which is not inconsequential, waits for me to turn my attention to it. When it is something like, even if Terry's authority was 35 and mine was 50, for example, it just means that we're sharing the burden of that bottleneck, and we're able to keep things flowing at a faster pace. And so it is those internal approvals that matter, as well as the time it takes to go to the board. And so, and none of this would we be reducing the reporting, but it just is more of an operational flow and thinking about the work that we want behind it for the work.
Thank you, Director Siga. Then Director Boyko. Please go ahead, Director Siga.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I think as long as the accounting practices and oversight are intact, I think this speaks to the increased cost of things. But if somebody can please clarify, board are not involved in operations. So I'm just wondering why the proposed expenditure for board is, higher.
If I'm understanding the question correctly, the board is identified just as the threshold to which staff bring a report to the board, so that there's that opportunity for deliberation, and it is greater transparency as well. Just with these larger purchases, even though the board approves a budget and we operate within that budget, there are certain purchases within the budget that the board still wants to see in greater detail. And right now that's 35 and above. And what we're saying is that could be 75 and above. So the board still has a role. What is important to remember is that none of this negates the importance of the board approving a budget. Like we're not proceeding with the purchasing of things that fall outside of the budget because we simply can't. If it's outside of the budget, we'd be coming with a budget amendment to the board first.
Thank you, Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. I think we should keep them at the same or raise them slightly. These large increases, like some are, what do you want to say, 10,000 or 1,000%. And we've had 23% increase in the CPI since 2013. I'm okay with a small increase, but I still want to have transparency at the board looking at things. Unless we get to a point where we're so big and we're getting 10 of these every meeting, then I think we should work above it. But what do we get? One of these every 2 months? That takes us 5 minutes to go through as a board and make sure we have some transparency on how much money is being spent. I'm okay keeping them the same or a slight increase. Thank you.
Jane?
I'm happy just to add to, in our background research, we looked at the regional districts from Strathcona all the way down through Comox Valley. The limits range quite significantly. Somewhere like the Comox Valley Regional District actually does not have a board approval limit as long as it's within their financial plan. Everything can be signed by the CAO. That ranges down to around the $100,000 level for board a approval. So we did see quite a skew in what has been provided amongst other regional districts, which is why we had set these. But like Daniel had noted, this is just proposed and open for discussion. So thank you.
Personally, I don't think these new limits are out of line for the ask. But that's only my opinion. Director Sparrow.
I will go with what you're saying too. This was done in 2013, 12 years ago, so. A little less slightly would be good for today. What's gonna happen in 3 or 4 years? We gotta revisit the whole thing again, so we have to. Think past today for tomorrow too, right? Hopefully this won't come again for another 10 years. It does seem kind of high right now, but we have time and definitely people.
Did you want any further feedback? Or are you okay, Shane?
Yeah, unless there is none.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm
I
sorry.
raised my hand.
I'm sorry, I didn't
It's
see
okay.
you. Director Johnson, please go ahead.
I'm okay with the proposed expenditure limits. As stated, it's pre-approved stuff anyway. It's not out of the norm, so I'm okay with the proposed.
Thank you for that comment. Appreciate it. Any other questions or comments? Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. So next we're proposing increases to the purchasing method limits, along with updating language to be inclusive of more method types. This goes without saying, staff will and may elect to issue a more defined competitive tender process for their below threshold, but these just set the minimum expectations. I want to speak specifically to the methods above $50,000. Staff proposed this be selected on a case-by-case basis in which the best option will be selected. So for example, a design project in which there is a set or defined scope would benefit from a guided quote process, something that we saw with our ACRD building feasibility study, of which the final scope would be defined at the end and issued to participants once finalized. What this is really aiming to do is give staff more flexibility when it comes to issuing those public procurements and really tailor it to what we are actually after, not just limited to directive methods.
Thank you, Director Sparrow.
So what level would your social procurement envision? Right from the single quote up, or would it be on the top, on the most expensive part?
It could be considered at any level. So any level, whether it's receiving a single quote, that is something that we still could ask for from that individual vendor, 2 or more written quotes, whether that's email or through a formal process. Again, something that we would just integrate into that process. So we are collecting that data and we are able to report back to the board as to the metrics on the goals that they did set.
Director Boyko?
Thank you, Chair. So does this raise the single bid acceptance up to $50,000? Is that what we're saying here? Just to clarify for everybody.
No. So what we're recommending is a single quote up to $10,000. But that comes with the caveat that if staff are going out for something that they feel is not best value, which again is directive of the general manager and procurement coordinator, they would be expected to elect a more formal process. But the limit for a single purchase would be $10,000.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to follow up. So the last time one of these came to the board, a competitive tender, we didn't see the scores. And I'd like to have that all continue seeing the scores and how it was broken down. If we're not going to go through the individual bids themselves unless we have a serious question, I'd still like to see the ranking and the matrix of how that score was developed, just for transparency. Thank you. Keep that going.
Thank you. And that's, we would be more than happy to include that in that board delegation bylaw as well, since we may be potentially updating it anyway. So.
Daniel?
I have a question because as we were having discussion, and it's in line with what Director Boyko just brought up, is I'm thinking that at a future session that we have together, would it be beneficial for us to make up a few mock scenarios where we're seeing some social procurement, where we're seeing a social enterprise, where we're seeing a mix of, you know, what I'll call regular versus social, just so we can run through a few mock scenarios. And it also would give the opportunity for the board to see what some of these questions and rating systems look like. Because it's dawning on me right now as we go through some of these that this would be an opportune time to see some of those details and see how the system could work and make sure that you're comfortable with that.
I think that's a fantastic idea. Any other comments or questions? So everybody's okay with these amounts? Everybody's happy. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So now we're going to be talking about change orders that are staff directed. The goal with integrating these change orders is to allow project staff the ability to continue to move forward their projects when there are additions or out of scope changes in which a delay would cause drastic project issues. So we're proposing a general 10% above the original contract value, of which it must be already included in the financial plan. The other big area with this one is I'm always of the mindset of not stating our allowable contract value publicly in our meetings, although this is a public policy. But it would be fantastic to just have this policy lead that. So when we do enter into a very large construction project, it's just expected. It's not explicitly stated. And as well, we'd recommend obviously change orders exceeding that 10% threshold and or the financial plan would always be brought to the board.
Questions or comments from the board? Director Lecourcier.
So the original bid was $2,500. And if it exceeds the 2,500, you got to bring the approval to the board.
So not in that case, because that would be still within the staff level authority to approve that expenditure limit. This would be explicitly currently for anything over $35,000, or as proposed, it would be over $75,000. So if we had a construction contract for $1 million, we would basically have $100,000 of potential contingency. As we all know, construction projects can be tense, fast-paced, and have many unforeseen issues. If there were change orders that exceeded the $100,000, staff would then come to the board. That's all with the caveat that $110,000, or sorry, $1.1 million that was planned for was in the financial plan budget. So it's really just for those board level approvals. Anything below, our expectation would be it's within staff approval authority.
Director Sparrow.
So a nice scenario, but you potentially could authorize something higher than your limit is now. In the scenario you just gave, because if your new limit 75,000, it's $100,000 change, you would be over your authorization budget. Under your 10%.
Yeah, and at that point, it would come back to the board. Staff would, if I'm understanding correctly.
So you're saying if it's over 75,000 in the new realm, it had to come back to the board anyway, because it's more than his limit that he can sign off on. But in a change order, it would be different. Is that what I'm hearing?
Sorry, yes. So if we have a contract award for $75,000, what this integrated into the policy would say is that the CAO may approve change orders up to 10% of that. So $7,500, Daniel would have authority if there's change orders that came in from our contractor. Now, if we had a change order come in for $10,000, that would be above and beyond the CAO's 10%, in which it would come back to the board for approval.
I think what I'm driving at, if we give you $1 million contract, right? And you had a 10% change order, it'd be $100,000, but your limit's $75,000. So you'd be okay to sign it, or we'd be okay to you sign it?
Yeah, we'd come back. So the signing authority still supersedes. So at the end of the day, because we have to predict for the size of contracts as well, right? And I think as we're moving along, I think, and I know at a staff level, we often will find that policies overlap, and we tend to take the high route of prudence. And so I would say in that scenario, which is a great scenario, not one that we had planned, It's above my signing authority, even though we'd be compliant with the 10%. I think both Terry and I would be very comfortable with the decision to say we're going to have to pause and go to the board on.
Director Leclerc.
Maybe the words need to be changed a bit, because just the word change order exceeding this threshold requires board approval. It doesn't tell you how much it is or how little it is or whatever. So I think you might change the words.
Noted, and I think what we may want to say, well, while respecting signing authorities, blah, blah, blah. So we just want to make sure that we're clear in the policy, and that's actually a great example, right? So these are the things that we have to make sure we tease out. And at the end of the day, the policy is there to ensure that you as a board are comfortable with how you're delegating this authority, and that the systems we have continue to be transparent for the public, right? And that's why we have these discussions, and that's a great example. So yeah, we will change that wording.
Any other questions or comments? Please go ahead, Shane.
Thank you. So next we'll be talking about some proposed modifications to our current listing of exempt expenditures. So first up, we're going to be looking at better defining our professional services by removing the initial 3 words, which does lead itself to a little bit of expansion, depending on the authority level. So we'd like to define it just as architectural, engineering, legal, planning, and accounting services. We're also proposing the removal of building maintenance. This is somewhat dependent on those proposed limit increases. If we do increase that level, staff do feel that there is no need to have a exempt expenditure for building maintenance, as well as we should be going to get multiple quotes. Moving on, we have also included 5 additional items for the committee to consider. So this includes purchasing from a public body or a not-for-profit organization, for health services and social services, when the acquisition is confidential or privileged in nature, and there could be economic disruption or in contrary to the public interest. This could be something similar to cyber security services. In the absence of receipt of any bids in response to a call for tenders. So this would be if we did go out, we did our public process and we didn't receive any, we would be able to go out directly to vendors, as well as vehicle purchases. As we see with vehicle purchases, the ever-changing environment, staff feel the nature of the purchase is fast and quick, typically, ensuring direct specifics that we need. Happy to discuss all these. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. So an exempt expenditure would be something that would not come to board and does not have limits, just to clarify that, right?
Yes.
So I have a problem with one part of this, because the last time we did a vehicle purchase was above and beyond and quite expensive. And I want to make sure we have transparency on what's actually required instead of the 3,500 Chevy that was purchased at a large lease rate and then repurchased when we actually bought it. Thank you. And I know that was in a special case during COVID, but we're not there now. And moving forward, vehicles, the lots are all full.
Daniel?
And that's perfectly okay. The point of this is purpose, or the purpose of this is to make sure that you're comfortable with the policy, and that ultimately, if you're not comfortable with that, then remove it. That is okay.
Did you have a comment, Director Lecourcier?
I do. A fire truck is a vehicle. Generally costs way more than 100,000, 200,000. I don't think that should be exempt.
Yeah, we can definitely specify that fire trucks are not included. We can update that to passenger vehicle purchases if it's desired to keep in. If not, we can take that.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Please go ahead.
Thank you. So next I'm going to be running through a few slides in a row, but I can obviously jump back and forth. So we're going to be talking about sole and single source purchasing. So these are loosely in our existing policy, but we're really hoping just to better define what these are and what they look like. So sole sourcing is when we purchase goods or services from one supplier because there's a lack of competitors or only one supplier can provide that good. Single sourcing is when there are multiple suppliers of the goods, of these goods, but they're purchased from only one individual. So, and this is really discouraged unless there's a valid business case that can be made. So single sourcing is only recommended when a public process has been processed and one bid or no bids were received, similar to our exemption slide. When a notice of intent to award has been issued to ensure capabilities with operational requirements. So this can speak to stuff like software where we have integrated software programs already, and our expectation would be is to continue to use that software. And when only one supplier can produce or provide that product or service. Single sourcing is only recommended when loss of service or product would be largely disruptive to the ACRD's operations. The project is a follow-up assignment based on work that was already completed. So if we had some work done on the building and we're looking to expand that work, it may be in the best interest to continue with those contractors. There's a warranty or guarantee requirement. So for instance, for a vehicle purchase, in order to maintain our warranty, we have to get service at a certain dealership. And then emergency situations. We have had a loose definition of emergency situations in the past. We're hoping here to better define it to an actual or imminent event or circumstance that poses immediate threat to safety, health, or well-being of the community, environment, or public property. And we explicitly state in the last few sentences that it does not include administrative issues or a lack of sufficient planning or compliance. I'll leave it there, but happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Dr. Sparrow.
So what are you looking at for this emergency circumstance? What are you looking at for a short definition or we define a definition? Are you okay with it?
We just wanted to bring it to the board. It is a lot more defined here than it is in our current policy. Again, the reason we want to better define it, as we've stated here, is it just provides staff more direction. We're happy to updates or other suggestions as we move through, but we felt like this was a very clear definition, and it allow staff that direction that there's no ability to manipulate what a emergency action is.
Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. So basically in emergency, there's no limit. Is that what this is saying? And that staff can do what they think is best? Second question before you answer that one is, after the emergency is over, because they always end at some point, is there going to be a general accounting and a report to staff on how monies was spent above and beyond what was normal? Thank you.
So the intent with the emergency circumstances clause is to ensure that if there is a risk to the public or those other identified areas, that staff have the ability to act now. It really is only going to be enacted when lives are at risk or there is that imminent danger. And as per that delegation bylaw, if these are approved by the CAO, then it would come through directly to that delegations bylaw as well. If we are operating a EOC, we go through our standard emergency operations approval processes with the province.
Okay, so there would be just a quick follow-up if I can, Chair. So there would be no limit, but according to the definition here, we have one of these almost every year in Port Alberni for the past couple of years, right? So it's not a one-off. This will be a very common occurrence moving forward. Thank you.
Terry was raising her hand, so I'll go to Terry.
Yeah, thank you. So not only would our policy, but the legislation also states, it doesn't define an emergency, but it does state that at the first available opportunity, staff are to bring back a report to the board, as well as any associated budget amendment. So this would also kind of qualify for like an accident at the airport that maybe isn't necessarily an EOC, but something needs to be done right away. And it would give them the ability, like individual staff people, like say Mark, our airport manager, the ability to work outside of his authority to quickly rectify if there's a life-threatening situation and say Daniel couldn't be reached at that time. But again, there has to be at the first available opportunity a report back to the board of what's occurred and the financial considerations that occurred because of that. So that's not just in the policy, but also part of the Local Government Act.
Daniel.
And for clarity, what we're proposing is tightening the definition. So a looser definition currently exists, which leaves a lot more openness to interpretation. And from my perspective, that doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies. I'd rather have the security of a tighter definition when it comes to emergencies. And that's why we're asking the board to consider a tighter definition.
Director Lacourcier.
If there's an emergency like that, do we immediately call our insurance people as well? You know, because that opens the area that if there's an accident, say at the airport, that we need to let our insurance know immediately. Does that tie in with this?
Yeah, like operationally, there's a lot of things that happen around this. And so depending on what the emergency is, we could be seeking approvals from the province if we're activating an emergency operations center. And there again, there's a checks and balance in terms of how spends occur. If it's something like at the airport or an emergency where an earthquake in the building is collapsing, then there would be a number of different staff that are reassigned to following up a whole list of procedures that we'd have to make sure are taking place. So it isn't simply, you know, an open door to say, let's start spending. It really is about a coordinated response in whatever shape or form, and making sure that we're able to move forward in that coordinated.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Please go ahead.
Thank you. So now we're going to be talking about some new sections that we're proposing, which include evaluation methods, contract award processes, methods of payment, as well as management and disqualification processes into the policy. So staff are proposing 4 methods in which purchasing will be evaluated. The first being lowest price. The next speak to best overall value. So there's a compliant bid with the lowest cost per point. This method looking at the total technical score and applying it over the cost of the bid. This would typically be used for methods in which we consider pricing at a 50% or greater evaluation of the overall project. Next is the compliant bid with the highest combined rating of technical score and price. What this does is this considers price as a percentage with technical score, whether that ranging from 10% all the way up to 40%. The final is the highest technical proposal within the stipulated budget. So these are going to be tailored towards projects where we want perfection. We want the proponent to deliver exactly what we want in the method that we want to the highest possible quality. I will note typically this would be utilized in areas where we do have significant grant funding, and we are able to utilize those funds to benefit the region or the service that is receiving those works. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Everybody's happy. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So this is a small proposed change to the approval process. So typically in the contract process, our existing system in which requests for decisions are brought to the board within the stated signing authority. However, in this case, we're looking for feedback on a preferred and secondary preferred vendor language in those awards. This language has been provided as the goal is to prevent any post-award negotiation conflicts. This will allow the board to direct award to a follow-up vendor or secondary vendor in case the finalized agreement with the preferred vendor is not met. The goal is to be both transparent to both the vendor and the ACRD while allowing for staff flexibility if a vendor is not in agreement post-award. We haven't had this situation arise, but it is a possibility. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Director Spiro.
Do you give awards, or points towards companies that have been in service longer than others? Or, I'm trying to think of when new companies are trying to come in and they don't have longevity in the field, but I get the feeling somewhere in procurement, there probably is a value put on people that have been around longer, which kind of discriminates against newer companies. Is that in the procurement policy?
Not explicitly stated in the policy. Currently, a portion of our evaluation grid includes experience. So we do require a set level of experience. So that's going to vary. If you are a company with a longer history, you may score higher, but you may also have more negative references depending on which project you are working on. So it is evaluated on a case-by-case basis. We do, though, look at overall experience of the company, ensuring that they have provided similar services and are capable of providing the service at the level that we need.
So when you say experience, I get kind of confused because there's experience of the company. You can get an apprentice, or you have a person starting a company out with 35 years experience with the company now. So there's two ways of looking at it, right? Both sides of the equation.
Yeah, both would definitely be considered in that experience when they are submitting.
Yeah, I was just going to add that often it's actually we want them to identify who their team, especially on like consulting jobs where we're wanting them to come in. A great example is like the cultural safety plan that we're doing through the emergency program right now. We wanted them to define who their team was and the experience of their team, not just the organization as a whole, because and in that scenario as well, we're also looking for their knowledge of our area and our community and what do you know about who's here and how we operate and stuff. So it's not just the overall blanket. Often it depends if we're then procuring I don't know, like turnout gear for fire departments. We never really ask who's actually making the turnout gear. We're just, are you meeting the specification? So it's definitely a case by case, but for the consulting roles, whether that's in planning, accounting, we're usually asking directly for who are you assigning to this project if we are successful and what is their experience.
Thank you for your clarification. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, please go ahead.
Thank you. So next is more of an administrative process, but obviously we would like to hear feedback on this as well. So we don't have any methods of payment stated in our current policy. What we're looking for is direction for on a case-by-case basis as directed by staff to either allow for single payments, milestone payments, or monthly payments. My intention is for this to be designated by the procurement coordinator to best fit what the services of those contracts are, but have feedback. Thank you.
Director Boyko.
I think having flexibility in this is good. Some companies are big and cannot have and can live without an invoice and a payment for a year, and some people need it every couple months or monthly. So having flexibility is good, and you'll actually have a good relationship with the people that are working for the ACRD. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that comment, Director Sparrow.
Yeah, you need flexibility. A lot of these things, like you do a fire truck, you can do it a number of ways. Milestone payments usually are what they do. So as the chassis reaches into the building, they get paid. And reach a certain point, they get paid. It gets here, it gets paid, and then usually you hold back 10% for 6 months until you're heard. So you've done all the milestones. Other ones you can do a lot of different ways, but you need to have all the flexibility. So yeah, you can keep all be good. And also you can affect the cost too. If you do milestone payments, you could actually lower the overall cost because you're not making the company incur debt for a year before you pay them. So there is methodology to all of it.
Yeah, I agree. Any other questions or comments? Yep, sounds good. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So we've almost made it. This is our second last slide. So this talks to vendor management and the disqualification process. So there may be times when the ACRD should or may disqualify a vendor from our processes. We put together our kind of recommended list from historical projects where we have seen issues. So our recommended process would include that vendors may be disqualified if there is a consistent failure to meet the standards specifics as specified in the contract work. A vendor in which the ACRD has engaged in legal action against a vendor or the other way around. I do want to put a caveat on there for this one is we will be taking this if it is desired to get a formal legal opinion. So we have to be very cautious with this language. And then a serious breach of contract. So this would be a explicit and intentional breach of a specific in the contract, whether that be non-compliance with insurance or not completing the specified scope of work. Happy for feedback on this. So, okay.
Questions or comments, Director Boyko?
Thank you. I'm going to be just generic as possible here. If a vendor has a yard and they have bylaw infringements and are subject to bylaw infractions and notifications and injunctions from the ACRD, is that company that owns the yard or operates out of it, are they going to be disqualified based on that, based on what we're saying here? Thank you.
I think that's definitely tied into the legal action line item there, which if desired by the committee, we can add into our legal request for clarification and our actual ability to act on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, please go ahead.
Second, I'm going to our second last. I'm sorry, I misspoke. So next steps, I had noted on there a continuation of discussion at the July 23rd, 2025 CAL meeting. We have made it through everything, but it does sound like for Daniel's comment that there may be some follow-up situational analysis. So we'll definitely work on that. As well, a survey is going to be sent to ACRD staff and the board of directors. It's going to be inclusive of what we discussed here today, as well as what was stated in the presentation. Our goal is to have a draft policy updates presented at the August 27th, 2025 Board of Directors meeting. If we need more time or more clarification as we work through the process, we're more than happy to facilitate that. Finally, I'll leave with thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your feedback. It's much appreciated, and I'm happy for any final questions if there are any.
I think that was an excellent job. I want to thank you and your finance department for pulling this together and presenting it, and really thank the board for a great discussion today. I'm going to make one comment, and you can tell me if I'm totally off base, but I always feel that the taxpayers think that their tax money just goes into black hole. I think it'd be really good if at the end of the year or when we do an annual report is we say X amount of dollars are spent in local businesses. We created X number of jobs in the community. We were able to hire so many women, so many First Nations, so many people at base employment barriers, those kinds of things that we can support and substantiate and show that we're doing really good work with your taxpayer dollars. Just a suggestion, I always say this to the city, but they never do it. But I think it's such a good idea to really show people where their tax dollars go. It doesn't go into a black hole. We just don't blow it on different things that we do really good work. Director Coots.
Thank you, Chair. I agree. I really like that comment. So a question through the chair to perhaps Daniel and Cynthia and staff. Would you like a motion of a request for that to have an annual ACRD tax finances and what we've done, what we've seen, what we've learned throughout the year, just in the concept of just wanting to have accountability and transparency. We're always wanting to have more information going out to the public, and I think this would be a wonderful opportunity to do that.
I am a big fan of resolutions because we act on resolutions. And perhaps just thinking of staff resources and if we're doing something different, a resolution that tells us to create a framework that the board could review prior to implementing would be a great first step.
Would you like to make that motion? I love it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would, giving the vernacular for however staff would like to put it together. I'll go.
And I would very happily second that motion. Director Beckett.
You beat me to it, Madam Chair. I was prepared to second that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Beckett. Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Oh, Director Siga, are you pre-voting or do you have comment?
I just want to comment that I think it's a really good idea, and if it can be made public in conjunction with the financial plan, that would be great. And ready for the vote. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll call for the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Any final questions or comments? Okay, and could I motion this report be received? Moved by Director Coots, second by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. No late business. Question period. Is there any questions or comments online, Cynthia?
No questions received through email and none through Zoom.
Thank you. No questions online, so could I get a motion to adjourn? Moved by Director Sparrow, seconded by Director Coots. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. We'll see everybody back here at 1:30, and I just really want to thank the board for some great comments and discussion on the topics today. They're both difficult and comprehensive topics, and I think everybody did a great job. Thank you so much. See you later.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your afternoon.